Steve Ryan for Coastal, Progressive, and Rainbow Forum on Society Bites Radio, bringing you topics of interest from the progressive and LGBTQ plus communities. Today we have a very, very good reviewed author here of poetry. His name is Jake SKEETS, and the book that we're going to be reviewing of poems is Eyes Bottled Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers. And with that, I'm going to read for our listeners here first a little bit about Jake, about some of the wonderful things that have been written. And I can find my paper here. Okay. This is from Literary Hub. Eyes Bottled Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers examines homosexuality and homosociological among, and I'm hoping I pronounced this right, dying men in Drunktown, New Mexico, a southwest desert town where desire and violence go hand in hand. The poems spare verse and direct language offer no shield from the brutality and the beauty of the landscape. Okay, Jake, with that introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself here.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Jake SKEETS. I am of the Blackstreet Wood people born for the water's edge. My maternal grandfathers are red running into water, and my paternal grandfathers are of the saltwater clan. So that's traditionally how, as Danae, we introduce ourselves whenever we meet anybody for the first time. And so I'm originally from New Mexico. I grew up around Gallup, New Mexico, which is a very storied community here near the Navajo Nation. And I wrote a book titled, just as it was mentioned, Eyes Bottled Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers. And I'm really excited to share it with everybody, and really excited to talk to you all.
Excellent. Jake, I was fascinated reading your book. I'll have to tell you, the poetry, and I need to tell you a little bit about me too here. I also lived in New Mexico for a while, but your book brought forward so many things that I did not see in New Mexico, because your writings and everything put it almost like I could visualize the different parts. And of course, I know Gallup, New Mexico. I lived in Santa Fe, and we made world history in a development we made there for a resort for the LGBTQ community. And the part of New Mexico I saw was different than what you're describing, and that's why it was so fascinating reading. This was another part of New Mexico that I didn't see. It's a beautiful state, a lot of fascinating things out there. And also, I had some very good friends there that were involved with us in the development who were Native American, and also had many connections through their ancestral lineages there. So tell me a little bit about here. When I was reading through your poetry and everything here, you have got some impressive credentials behind you here and some achievements. Now, I also want to ask you quick before I forget this. Are you going to be at the Miami Book Fair in November?
Yes, I'll be there, and I'm excited.
Excellent. I'll be there too. Look forward to seeing you down there, and hopefully some of our listeners will also attend too, and maybe attend some book signing ceremonies and things like this that will be coming up there. Is this your first book of poetry that you've written? I think you've written some other things before this, haven't you?
Oh, no, this is my debut collection. I do have some poems that were published beforehand, just in various journals and literary magazines. But yeah, this is a debut for me.
Oh, okay. Well, you've certainly got some excellent reviews here, Jake. Help me with this word here and explain this a little bit more to me and our listeners too. D-I-N-E, masculinity, dying. I have not heard that term before. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So the word is pronounced dene, which
dene.
Is the
okay.
which is the no worries, which is the ancestral name for Navajo people. Of course, our reservation here in New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah is known as the Navajo Nation, but traditionally and ancestally we were known as dene. So that's how I tend to introduce myself, of course, I may say Navajo and Diné sort of interchangeably, but they mean the same thing, which is just in reference to where I come from and the people that I come from.
Okay, excellent. When I was reading through your poetry here and everything, you had some very graphic descriptions of some of the brutality and things that went on there, and I'm guessing some of this I'm assuming may be real or something, and it's not just from fiction. Am I correct?
Yeah, so I did a lot of research for the book. I mean, on one hand, I did grow up near Gallup, and so I attended Gallup public schools most of my life before going to college. So I was sort of firsthand know the type of violence that occurs inside of Gallup. And then, of course, when I was sort of getting ready to create the book and order the book, I did a lot of research to be sure that, just to get a full grappling of what is out there. And there are a lot of articles where I was reading about all these different acts of violences, and it did definitely take a toll during the writing, but I'm definitely glad to hear that so many are reading and positively reviewing it, just so that, they understand that there's another story to Gallup and definitely another story to New Mexico.
Excellent. Even in there, I looked up the El Rancho Hotel to verify. I said, is this real? And sure enough, it is. And I've been through Gallup a number of times, New Mexico. In fact, as a very small kid, I remember going through Gallup, New Mexico. It's there on Highway 66 and now Interstate 40. And that's where it has a long history coming through there. Tell me, in some of the poetry you mentioned there, the part about the Diné, masculinity. Tell me about some of your thoughts and your processes and your research that you did, and when you wrote this. I'm assuming that it took some thinking and everything, obviously, to put this together, and about your culture there. I'm familiar with the Pewaukee over there as well, because one of my best friends there is Pewaukee, and he helped me understand a lot about the Native American culture there in New Mexico when I was there, when we were building our resort, and so that helped a lot. I also, of course, have heard the Navajo for years, but the Diné is a new term for me. So help me understand this a little bit about the masculinity part and what your thought process was when you're putting this together.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So in terms of masculinity, I was approaching it through two lenses. So the first would be an ancestral Navajo or Diné understanding of masculinity. And of course, the other sort of lens was the more American toxic masculinity. And I think both are present throughout the collection. And that was really what I was intending for the reader, having this balance between beauty and brutality when it comes to masculinity, and really showing that the type of work that goes into sort of navigating both beauty and brutality when it comes to masculinity. And at the end of the day, that's was my overall goal, and that was sort of a leverage for me, or not necessarily leverage, but a place where I could find myself during the writing. Because again, there's a lot of grief that sort of is behind the collection, and I didn't want to sort of ponder on it too much, or force the reader into this sort of journey that they weren't necessarily ready for. So I feel like the beauty aspect, or the more traditional or ancestral Navajo understanding of masculinity, is what sort of came forward organically, which was very exciting for me as I was going through, because it also offered, some relief on my end as a writer and as a poet when I was creating the collection.
And what made you do versus? Okay, I'm just curious. Excuse me if the question is out of ignorance, but in versus writing a regular, like a little novel, what made you decide to go with the poetry? Was it a way of telling your story better, or telling the story and getting the points out better, or what led you to do the poetry versus a novel?
Yeah, so I'm a poet first. I mean, I was trained in poetry.
That explains it then. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because because some of the graphic in here, I was thinking this would almost fit into with a novel, like, because it's the brutality and the stuff that went on and everything, and it made me think, this would be in a novel, but it's done through poetry. And I really enjoyed it, and I'm not a person who reads a lot of poetry, but I got fascinated after I started reading it and researching some of this myself and looking into it a little bit further. And plus my own connections to New Mexico made it even more fascinating. And every time, like I said before, I was thinking, boy, this is the part of New Mexico I knew was there probably, but I didn't see it. And so This was very rewarding, and I hope for other readers it'll be the same too. Tell me some more thoughts that you have here when you were putting the book together. Give me, maybe if you can summarize, what were some of the top two or three points that you wanted to get across in the book, in the poetry, and that you were hoping that the reader would take away from this?
Yeah. So, I mean, the top 3 points, well, the first would probably be the idea of vulnerability and intimacy existing in a place like Gallup, New Mexico, existing in a place where not many know about. And that was something I wanted to highlight because, growing up there, that's, where I learned desire, right? It's a small town, but of course it has a lot of history. So that was one thing that I wanted to focus on. The other was highlighting the issues that are still existing in Gallup. I mean, the stories and those graphic stories that you're referring to are still happening today. I still get newspapers from Gallup, and it sort of comes almost weekly where we have another headline. And the third thing I think is just giving the world a little glimpse into the thought processes of my family and of Navajo people in general. This whole notion of navigating trauma, navigating grief with beauty, I think is something very significant and something that I wanted to sort of show to the world that this is here, at least in our country, down here on Navajo, New Mexico and Arizona. That is how we navigate the world. And so hence the title, Eyes Bottled Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers.
Okay, that's what I was wondering where there's a poem, of course, in there like that too, that same name, and I was wondering what made you choose that as the main name for it, and you've kind of explained it there. Then that helps a little bit in understanding it. The picture that's on the cover, was there any particular thought that went into selecting that particular picture, just kind of as a generic picture of what life is there and something, or was there any particular selection that went into that?
Yeah, well, the portrait on the cover is actually of my uncle, Benson James. He was photographed by Richard Avedon in 1979 in Gallup, and a year later, Benson actually was murdered in Gallup, and so it's a very interesting story. I felt captured everything I was trying to get at with the collection, and at first I was very hesitant to have the image of the cover, but after talking with my family and talking with the publisher Milkweed, I was able to come to sort of terms with it being allowed as the cover.
Now, yes, I remember you mentioned your uncle in the poetry there too. Yes, I remember that, and so that fits together now. Yeah, okay, now I understand. So, okay, that helps explain that then a little bit. Do you think? Okay, Gallup, New Mexico sits in the middle of